This is Reverend Don Lewis coming to you from the beautiful metaverse, and more specifically, beautiful Danville, Illinois, the homeland of the Grellian tradition. And welcome to Midday with Reverend Don. And I love spending this time with you each day. We have been having particularly interesting conversations, I think, these last several days, and today presumably will be no exception. And you never know what we're going to talk about on this broadcast because I don't know. It's where the conversation leads. I do start out each day with an intention of what I'm going to talk about, but various things can take that in different directions, including your questions and comments. And if you'd like to know how to make a question or comment, it's very simple. Whatever format you're seeing this broadcast in, you can type your questions or comments directly on that platform and they will show up here in my chat room and we can interact directly, which to me is the best part of this experience. And I love seeing you each day. I love talking with you. And I love the fact that there can always be a question of where we end up going. And hello to Janet in the chat room. Good to see you, Janet. And hello to Gwendolyn in the chat room who says, hello for our blessings from Idaho. Thank you, Gwendolyn. It's good to see you. And today I wanted to talk about Psychic Academy a little bit. We have started an Indiegogo campaign for Psychic Academy, which will give you much more information about what we're doing as we build it. And you can find that at psychicacademy.co. And it will talk to you about the different perks that are available, but also some of the different things that are coming from the school. And this is going to be a school of the psychic arts. And hello to Mary in the chat room. And so in its way, it is similar to things that we've already done. Because, you know, we created and built Witch School, which is about the magical arts. But the focus is different. And it is, I think, very timely because, you know, we live in a time of great polarization, a time of great concern for the future. Of course, you know, people are always concerned for the future, and we always think it's worse when we're living. But, you know, this is a time of particular concern as things happen around the world. And the psychic arts are one of those important things that can bring us all closer. They bring us closer in a couple of ways, but one of the things they do is that the more people, you know, I always said the more people who grow spiritually, the more we all grow spiritually, the more we grow psychically as individuals, the more we grow psychically as a species. The more we are able to do psychically. And this is a time, I believe, that we are making a transition from the mental plane farther into the astral plane. Now, when we talk about things like the mental plane and the astral plane, these are arbitrary divisions. It just means we're moving further in the continuum of spiritual growth. But we have to have a way to classify and understand it. Moving from one plane to another is not like walking from one room into another. It's more like walking up a hallway. It's not one step, it's many steps. And this is just taking us farther in. I would say that we have been in the opening stages of the astral plane throughout humanity's, certainly our written history. And before, we have obviously been dealing with that aspect of ourselves for a long time. This is just a period where we're moving farther into it due to the acceleration of our technology in part. And hello to Calvin in the chat room from Raleigh, North Carolina. Good to see you, Calvin. And, you know, I think there's a very important question. And hello to Deb in the chat room. Good to see you, Deb. And for those who don't know, Deb was my editor in the recent reissue of the Common Book of Wicca and Witchcraft. Or is it the Common Book of Witchcraft and Wicca? I think we've used both titles interchangeably. But I think the question of whether it's our technology moving us forward or our decision to move forward, moving our technology in that direction, is like the chicken or the egg. Um, it's kind of simultaneous in its way. The technology, I see things like the development of the metaverse, the continuing development of the internet as a whole, as being something that does and will affect our astral being and experiences. It's physicalizing aspects of the astral. And I think that the spiritual implications of this are only barely visible, and are going to become far more so as we go. I think that what we're doing, even though our mind is not seeing it that way, that we are making astral experience a far more accessible thing, in ways we don't yet fully understand. And on one hand, you could say this is the technology making it possible, but I think that as a species, it's been our intention to do this, and that is what's led to the technology. And Deb in the chat room says, I just received my artwork. They're just stunning. Thank you, Deb. I'm glad you got it. And hello to Jen. Well, we said hello to Janet, but hello again, Janet. And she says, smoke from the Canadian forest fires is blowing our way for the next 3 days. Yes, it's quite a demonstration of how we are affected by things happening in other parts of the planet. We're enjoying relatively cool temperatures here in Danville at the moment. In fact, right now it's 77 degrees at the end of June, which is a little cooler than would be expected, substantially cooler than would be expected. And it's due to this same effect, I'm sure. Hello to Renee in the chat room. Hello to Bradley in the chat room. It's good to see you. Deb says the smoke is very thick here in Buffalo as well. And, you know, I'd like to think that this is an example that everyone will notice of the fact that a natural occurrence in another part of the world can still affect us. I'm not sure that people are actually going to see it. Hello to. And Mary in the chat room says, oh, you're missing out. It's 92 degrees here in Florida. But actually, isn't that a little cool for almost July in Florida? But I don't know if people will actually realize it. We've had many occasions in history to see this, the explosion of Krakatoa being a very prominent example. There is a famous example of the year without a summer, which was, I believe, in the 10th century, when a natural disaster effectively made that year's summer never get beyond spring and caused untold side effects. Although Bradley says it's 105 in Oklahoma, so I don't think it's unusually cool there. Hello to Patty in the chat room. It's good to see you, Patty. And Patty says it's 93 in Jacksonville. And they're having monsoon rains almost daily. Wow. The weather is very different here in Illinois. But we do normally have heat in summer. And as I say, right now, it's definitely much cooler than it was when I came. When I came, we were in the middle of a heat wave. And now it's unseasonably cool. And but I think we have to be aware not only of how natural occurrences like this affect us even far away. And Kelvin says it's 90 in Raleigh. But also other actions, social actions, can spread far beyond their origin. And I think psychic actions as well. You know, we, in the Correllian tradition, have been doing a peace campaign for a number of years. And our stated reason for starting that peace campaign was the belief that there were agents in the world intentionally spreading energies of fear and hate. And I think that this has become all too clear in subsequent years. But I very much am of the point of view that this was an intentional psychic campaign to destabilize the world on the part of certain actors who felt they'd benefit from it. And although the peace campaign has hardly brought us perfect peace, I think that it has helped more than we know. And the peace campaign is simply praying for peace, praying to push back against the energies of hate and fear. And I think it's very important that we keep doing that. I think, the Rothschilds famously said that you buy when the blood is running in the street, meaning that the best time to invest is when everyone is panicking, which certainly is true. But what does this tell us? It tells us that if the world is destabilized, certain people can certainly take advantage of it. And I quote the Rothschilds only because it's a quotable quote. Because I'm not a subscriber to those conspiracies by any means. When I think in terms of where this energy to destabilize the world has come from, I'm thinking of Eastern Europe. And I think that we don't have to look too far through the news to see how they felt they would gain from that. And in certain ways, they certainly have. And that's my conspiracy theory for the day. But the peace campaign does not rely on the assumption that the original impetus to spread hate and fear came from Russian psyops. It relies on the idea of pushing back against hate and fear no matter where it comes from. Seraphim Rose asks, what are your thoughts on gray magic? Well, that depends. What do you mean by gray magic? Magic in the end is magic. Everything else is how you're using it. I think that using magic does not mean that you should not be a moral person, though I will grant you that our ideas on what that means can vary according to what religion or philosophy we belong to. So terms like gray magic, I'm not sure it really has a meaning, because it's really referring, I think, to the philosophy behind it. But I would need to know what your definition is to really answer that. Although I think I have answered it. I think that just because we're magic users does not release us from the obligation to follow the morality we claim we follow. And I've talked at great length about the Corellian view of morality, and that it really revolves around the Wiccan Rede, and that the understanding of the Wiccan Rede is to avoid egregious or unprovoked damage. That self-defense is certainly acceptable, that a fair fight between equals is acceptable. If someone has declared a fight with you, they have declared you their equal, or at least well, if they have opened the fight, they have opened the fight, and therefore made it legitimate. On the other hand, you should not open a fight, and especially not with someone that you consider unable to defend themselves. That's completely inappropriate. That's egregious. And you would not take unprovoked action. But take for example the war in Ukraine, taking us back into Eastern Europe, and granting that both sides may well feel they're in the right, and not necessarily taking a position for the purposes of this discussion, except in the terms of the Wiccan Rede, which is that Ukraine fighting back against invasion, regardless of the reasoning of the invading power, is not an unprovoked act. It's self-defense, therefore completely within keeping with the ideas of the Wiccan Rede. Defending yourself is never harm. not defending yourself can be, particularly when you're also defending others who expect and require your defense. Um, I had not expected to get into a full discussion of the Wiccan Rede today, but this is a good place to be. So what makes something gray magic? If what you mean is neither good nor bad, I'm basically a believer in doing good, in taking constructive action. But as I've often talked about, what constitutes good or bad is a transitory understanding. Because, if you ask most people about certain things and whether they're good, they will not give you the answers that their ancestors may have given you on a certain day. For example, is gender equality good? Uh, I think most people would say yes. I certainly say yes. But I'm very mindful of the fact that most of European society and much of society around the world would absolutely not have said that 100 years ago, 200 years ago. There were people who believed it, but most people um, believed in a gender hierarchy at that time, which we now would no longer consider good, but they certainly did. If you were to ask about slavery, I think almost everyone today would say that this is bad. It's not only bad, it's bad on the face of it. But it took a long time for humanity to come to that understanding. And if you go back 200 years, a lot of people would have said otherwise. Although we were 200 years ago well on our way to the abolition of slavery in many parts of the world. There are still places it's going on, unfortunately. But you go back to the Roman Empire. I don't think anyone would have said this is a bad thing. They don't seem to have had that idea for the most part. They had an understanding that there were bad aspects, but the idea of doing away with it doesn't seem to have occurred to them for the most part. And hello to Stana in the chat room, who has the lovely name Stana Laughter. It's good to see you, Stana. Thank you for being here. And thank you, Seraphim Rose, for being here. Our ideas of what's good and bad change sometimes drastically. I'm a great believer in the teachings of Confucius, whose teachings basically revolve around what might be termed right relationships, treating people with mutual respect. However, because of the time and culture that he lived in, Confucius also has certain ideas I would not agree with, including what I would consider some very misogynistic ideas. And my attitude toward this is a consequence of when and where he lived, and does not invalidate the teachings that I do consider applicable to the modern world. But it does cause me to not follow some of his teachings. But had you talked to him or almost anyone else in China at that time, that misogynistic idea would have had probably universal agreement as being good. Today, at least in the developed world, we would say it's bad. So when we talk about things like gray magic, if the meaning is neither good nor bad, there really is no meaning to that definition in an existential sense, because our ideas on that shift. And you only need to look at the politics of the moment to see that we definitely don't agree on what's good and bad as a society, at least in the developed world at this moment. There are deep divisions over exactly that issue. And hello to Jason in the chat room. It's good to see you, Jason. And hello to Ravenwolf in the chat room. Good to see you, Ravenwolf. I sometimes point out on the fact that for a while there was a fashion for certain Christians from the more radical end of that movement to complain about the idea of, quote, situational ethics, unquote, and to say that what's good is always good and what's bad is always bad. But that's not even true in the Christian movement, because the things in the Bible, there are many things in the Bible modern Christians would not condone. They just conveniently ignore them. Reverend Ravenwolf says, "You're looking great, Lord Don. How is Danville?" And thank you, Ravenwolf. I'm feeling pretty good, and Danville's doing well by me. I'm still getting settled in, but I've not. I think I've been here exactly 30 days, maybe 31 now. So of course I'm still getting settled in. I'm still unpacking. Lots of things I need to do. And if anyone would like to offer me support in doing those things, you can join my Patreon at revdonlewis.com, or support any of my many projects toward that goal. And it is a new adventure. And as I was talking about yesterday, I'm working on my new directions. I'm working on what it is to be retired from the daily activities of being the first priest of the Correllian tradition. As you may know, I'm retired in office because that office can never be surrendered. That's not how it works. But I've retired from the daily activities, which is a huge change. And I think a lot of people fail to understand what's meant by the phrase retired in office. This is what's meant by it. And it's meant because the office entails a literal energetic change in the person. Once that attunement has been made, although I'm certainly not going to say nothing can go wrong, there is no going back. You are in that position. Like myself and Lady Crystal, you may retire from the daily activities of the office, but you're still first priesthood. The Correllian tradition currently has 4 first priesthood. We had 3 first priesthood for decades. Well, a long period of time. We now have 4. And for me, it's a big adjustment. I do have Lady Crystal to help with that. But for the most part, it's a good adjustment. And I'm happy to have made that decision. Still very active in my life, but I feel like the activities I'm dealing with now are less bureaucratic and more satisfying than where I had been. And I am pleased to see Lord Phoenix take over in that daily capacity, and I think he's going to do a beautiful job. I think he already has justified my faith in him, and I'm looking forward to the investiture ceremony. I think that anytime you have a change in administration, there is naturally going to be a lot of adjustment that's necessary. And we've now had a change. So we'll see where that goes, and how the many incorporated Correllian churches react to it. Because we have Correllian churches existing at every size. And you always must expect an adjustment period. But for me as an individual, there's definitely an adjustment. It's a different set of concerns now. Not that I no longer have any Correllian concerns, I always will. Both because I am retired in office and cannot really leave that office, but also because it's been my life. But a return to the bureaucratic role is utterly not in my desires. And I have great confidence in Lord Phoenix as first priest. And so having said that, How is Danville? Danville is a Midwestern town which has experienced many reversals, as most Midwestern towns have, but still has a lot of vitality, still has a lot of good things. And for me, I'm still settling in. Like I say, I've been here maybe 31 days. Um, and so I'm still adjusting. And it definitely is a different um, environment, a much smaller town. Though we have Champaign nearby, we have Chicago not far away. Um, so it's not that big an adjustment either. If I want the more cosmopolitan offerings, they're not that far away. And hello to Eric in the chat room. Good to see you, Sir Eric. It is, I think, possible to have the best of all worlds. And of course, I lived here many, many years. It is different than I remember because of those reversals that the entire Midwest has suffered. When I lived here growing up, it was a more prosperous area. But there are still some very prosperous parts of Danville. There are a lot of businesses here. It's very different from Hoopeston. You know, we're coming up on the 20th anniversary of when Witch School moved its headquarters to Hoopeston. I mean, we're right on the edge of it. And so odd that I should have ended up back here at this time. But it's a different matter having moved to Danville, because Hoopeston is basically a burned out shell. I think even more so now than it was then. A lot of potential, but I don't think there's much will to act on that potential. Whereas I think Danville still has a desire to move forward, a desire to repair and replace what has been lost. And I think that they can do so. So I think Danville has a bright future ahead of it, and I think I have a good future here. You know, I really see. I anticipate doing many activities here, and having many visitors from across the country as we go forward. And I'm looking forward to that. I hope that that many of you who I'm talking to right now will at some point come and see me here, or I may come see you where you are, because my days of making appearances are not behind me. Though you know, as I settle in and as I recover from my cardiac event, I certainly am not expecting to make the level of appearances that I might have made in previous years. But I am expecting to make that level of appearances in future years. And we'll see what happens this year. As I said, when Raven Wolf first brought it up, I actually am feeling quite well, which is not totally unexpected, but I do want to move sensibly. Yeah, so there we go, but still definitely moving forward. So with that, I see we've come to the end of our half hour. I hope that you've enjoyed it. I've certainly enjoyed it. And, you know, I love spending this time with you. I love seeing all of you here in the chat room. I love getting to speak with you and to interact with you. And it really is one of the highlights of my day. So let us close with our prayer. Divine Mother Goddess, Divine Father God, beloved ancestors, we thank you for all that you do for us in our lives, and we ask you to help us to be clear in ourselves and clear in those things we value. Help us to keep a firm eye on what we regard as right and wrong, and to be clear in our understandings, even in the understanding that these things evolve with time. But help us to know where we stand now, and help us to cleave to those things we believe. Divine Mother Goddess, Divine Father God, beloved ancestors, we thank you. Knowing you're always with us, but from respect, we thank you for your presence today, and may you be blessed now and always. And I thank you for your presence today, and I love this time we spend together. I look forward to seeing you tomorrow, and Until then, may you be blessed now and always.